So this is an assignment that I have for one of my PRTM classes. And basically, I just have to interview two people in the tourism event management field and
Cool.
ask them some questions about what we've been learning in class.
Sweet.
So, yeah, awesome. So, the first question is, can you tell me about your background and how you got into tourism and the hospitality industry?
Yeah. Well, I was a PRTM major at Clemson. And while I was at Clemson, I worked for Clemson Outdoor Rec and Education. And that was really where it all started, trip leading with them and working with equipment with them. And then when I graduated and finished up my master's at Clemson, I went and worked in Alaska as a sea kayak guide for 6 months, which was really awesome. So I got to do that seasonal side. And now that I'm at Duke, as coordinator of outdoor adventures, I'm more in a full-time role, a little bit more professional role, but I oversee the climbing wall and the camping equipment rentals and all the students.
Thanks. That's so cool. So, you've had four different jobs since you graduated your master's?
Just working in Alaska and then here at Duke
Okay.
since graduating, yeah.
Clemson, I guess that was before your master's.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. While I was doing my master's, I was graduate assistant, so it's like tied to your education. So that was really cool experience.
Awesome. Okay. So, in your current role at Duke, what are your primary responsibilities?
Yeah, so my time is kind of divided 50-50 between the climbing wall operations. So that oversees like maintenance of the climbing wall, route setting of the climbing wall, student scheduling and training, hiring, that whole side. And then the other 50% is the equipment rentals. So we have a like warehouse room that's got all kinds of camping equipment, rain gear, hiking boots, backpacks, sleeping bags, tents, like kind of whatever you would want. And so maintaining that inventory, maintaining the database that keeps track of all of it and all the conditions, taking care of like making sure our website is up to date with like rental hours and rental forms, and then kind of same as climbing wall, managing the students that do that.
Okay. So, do you have people working under you in both of those positions? Okay.
Yep, I
So,
have students in both.
okay. So, how do you motivate and develop your team to provide exceptional customer service? So, how do you manage them and encourage them to do their job well and even better?
Yeah, that's what I've just spent a lot of the year doing.
Mhm.
And I would say just bringing energy to the portions that like I get to do with them to kind of translate that or like encourage that to trickle down. And so I get to spend a lot of time with our supervisors, so they're kind of in like a manager position, slightly above like the average student. And so I try and bring a lot of energy to the training and work with them so that then hopefully like they're energized when they're working with students. Um, I try and do a lot of like feedback evals so that like we can improve things that are going wrong, or make changes as needed. Um, yeah.
So I know you said you're involved in hiring, but how involved are you in that process? Like, do you do interviews with that? And then with the evaluations, how do you handle if you need to fire someone?
Yeah. So hiring, we get to do like the whole process. So Duke has their own like application portal. I think it was Clemson has a similar thing. Um, but it's called JobX, and so we can write our like job description for students and like put all the info in and post it. And then we collect like their responses, their resumes, cover letters, that kind of thing, go through them. And we'll usually interview like 10 to 15 students at a time and then hire from that group. And we try and have like current student employees involved as well so that they kind of have a say in who they're working with. And then as far as evaluations go, I try and do one once a semester. So in the fall, we'll focus on like personal growth, and in the spring, we try and focus on program growth, so that you kind of like hit both of those without making it a super long form. But it's generally like an online form that they can fill out, and then I'll have an option at the bottom, like if they want to meet in person and talk about it. But we'll do it two ways where they evaluate like me and my boss, and then we'll evaluate them, as well as like going off their response. Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. How do you handle, like, as opposed to just the students that are working for you? Do you ever manage other students that are just using the equipment or going on trips with you? How do you get their input?
Yes, very similarly. So at the climbing wall, we've got like a little QR code that says like, how are we doing? And they can fill that out. And then on trips on the drive back, we'll pass around a survey to see what they thought, and they always have lots of thoughts. So it's pretty similar, just like a separate form.
Okay. And then I did want to know, so with the kayaking tours, how is it different working in a university setting versus like the general public?
Yeah, I think number one difference would be just like the range of demographics you work with. So with the sea kayaking, we'll do as young as like 6-year-olds all the way up to like folks in retirement. And so on any given day, you could be working with a family, you could be working with a group of retirees, you could have a mix. And so learning to like communicate to different age levels or interest levels or like what people do professionally just like really dictates kind of like what that conversation is throughout the day. Whereas for Duke Rec and PE, I work majority of the time with students like 18 to 25, maybe 18 to 30, sometimes with grad students. And so folks have a little bit more in common with each other usually. Everybody on campus at Duke lives on campus. They have to like opt out of housing rather than opting in.
Okay.
So there's like kind of a different culture because everybody lives like really close together. So it's easy for them to like kind of like build community on campus. But I think that age difference would be like the biggest thing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. This one's more about like the industry. How do you stay informed about changes in regulations or standards?
Hmm, that's a good one. There are like various different conferences or organizations that like function as conferences. So AOR, the shoot, I don't know off the top of my head what it stands for. Let me Google it. Association of Outdoor Recreation and Education. They tend to like put out like big, like if there's like some big change, especially with like public land management that we need to know about for permitting. A lot of folks will follow along with them. The National Park Service puts out a good amount of information. And then within like different regions, generally like outdoor rec professionals will kind of form like their own little groups. So I meet once a month with like all the South Carolina and North Carolina collegiate outdoor rec programs that want to meet. So like Clemson, the folks there are on it. UNC Chapel Hill, UNC Charlotte, UNC Wilmington, UNC Greensboro, Duke. NC State, Furman, USC, like all those schools will get together. And that's probably the most helpful because folks will just like pull any tidbits that they've heard from anything. Um, and we kind of just like get to share resources in that.
Yeah. Do you find that a lot of those problems are those problems you face in different programs, everyone's dealing with similar things? Or is it
Yeah,
pretty okay?
yeah, it's pretty similar, which is like really nice
Mhm.
because like you realize you're not like siloed, but then also sometimes it just turns into like everyone being like frustrated with the same thing. But it is nice to like have camaraderie in that.
Nice. That's really cool. Okay. So what current trends in tourism and hospitality do you find most interesting?
Current trends. This takes a turn because it doesn't really have anything to do with what I work with, but I think the rise in like professional women's sports has been really interesting and the tourism surrounding that. So like the NWSL just had their championship game with Spirit and Gotham. And there was, I know, a huge like fan base following that. So I think that's been really interesting to watch the development of for the last like maybe 10 years or so.
Yeah, that one was a little off track, but anyways, this one's more applicable. So what is one of the biggest challenges you faced in your career and how did you overcome it?
Biggest challenges. So I don't know if maybe Lexi told you this or not. But I just absolutely adored working in Alaska. It was beautiful, so many adventures, so many cool people, and just like getting to see whales and glaciers and all the things. And so moving back for the job at Duke, while it was like career goals and like very exciting, it was really tough from going from living like on the water and by the mountains to like living in the middle of the state. So I think that relocation has been the hardest just because it's like such a different culture and like different access to outdoor recreation. So I'm actually leaving Duke
Oh.
at the end of January and going back to Alaska. And that'll be my like short-term, long-term plan. Like I'm not making plans after this summer. We'll just kind of see where life takes me.
Mhm.
So I think making that decision and knowing that like I'm still chasing a dream and a goal and a passion, and like making choices that will help my career out, but also letting that not be linear, was like hard to do, but I'm really excited about it. And it's really nice. Today was like the first day that everyone in my department knew, so I don't feel like I'm like keeping a secret anymore. Uh,
Yeah.
so I think just navigating that. I was just at Duke for a year, and so like knowing that that would be like kind of a disappointment for them, and just kind of working through all that. It's probably the most challenging.
I have a related question to that. Yeah, I was gonna ask you about the high turnover rates in like PRTM and that kind of thing, and also just do you see a lot of people as you've been working that are also moving around between jobs a lot pretty often?
Yeah, I would say in the coordinator level, so like
Mhm.
most of the positions, it's like a coordinator and then an assistant director or a director, depending on like how their department is structured. So the coordinator positions tend to turn over like 1 to 3 years pretty fast. And even just like in the year I've been here in my department, like we've had a couple coordinators leave and a couple hired. It was like one girl's first day today, for like aquatics or intramurals or like different parts of the department. So I'd say like those entry level positions are like pretty fast turnover because it's usually like pretty low pay and like pretty high expectations, a lot of evening work and stuff like that. But I think folks once they find an area that they like tend to commit a bit more.
Okay.
Like our like director level positions, like folks like own a home, they have a family, like they've kind of like decided to put down roots here.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. I don't I'm sure there's more that goes into like high turnover rates. But like from my view, it's just like people trying to figure out where they want to live, what they want to do, what makes most sense.
And then kind of related to that, probably more applicable to Alaska, but how do you see seasonality affecting how you plan events and do manage people? And even do you ever hire like additional short-term employees during peak seasons?
Yeah, so Alaska is obviously like textbook example of like seasonal work. So we're 6 month employees, April through like end of September, beginning of October. And then they don't have anyone on staff for the rest of the year.
Mhm.
So that's like tried and true seasonal work. But then even here at Duke, I have to pay attention to like the sophomores will study abroad fall of sophomore year, or fall of junior year, depending on what major they're in. And I know it was a thing at Clemson, and I was there during COVID, so like maybe it was like a little bit different, but I had 14 of my staff abroad this
Wow.
fall. So out of a staff of 50, like that's a good chunk of them. So we had to hire some people to kind of cover up their shifts, but then they'll be back in the spring. So we'll have like 65 people instead of 50,
Right.
which is fun. But you just kind of have to plan for like having enough shifts, having enough work. I didn't want to hire people for one semester and let them go. Like that feels mean. Um, but it is interesting how like it like ebbs and flows, and like students' commitment. Like you'll train up a group of trip leaders. That's probably where most training goes into, or like most money goes into training. So you'll get those trip leaders ready to go. They'll lead like a semester and then they're abroad. So you lose them for 6 months and then they come back, but they need some training to like get back in the swing of things. So I think when we hire, we're often looking for like freshmen or fall sophomores, because we want them to be here as long as possible so that they can get the most out of that training. Yeah.
Nice. That's super helpful. Um, So especially dealing with outdoor recreation, how do you deal with unexpected situations like a crisis or a natural disaster or a health emergency or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say for me, like if I'm like the one responding,
Mhm.
just trying to delegate and like stay calm. But then for training students to like respond in those situations, we make sure they have a wilderness first aid or wilderness first responder certification, depending on like where they're going to be, if they're front country or back country. And then I try and do it through all of their training where they know like they have the ability to like make a choice and I'll stand behind them. Because I think if they're trying to think like, oh, what would Maggie do or what would Nathan do? That messes them up more than if they just like make choices and know that like we're gonna stand behind them. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. I feel like it's a lot easier to manage here in North Carolina because like there's fewer places where you're like super remote. But in Alaska, you do a lot of thinking about like how much battery does my walkie have? Like my marine radio, how much does it have left? Do I have my flares on me? Do I have a satellite phone? Just like a lot more like logistical details. Versus here, it's like making sure students know like the process to follow for Duke to make sure that um like insurance and everything gets worked out.
Okay. How do you work with other departments within your role, like marketing or sales or operations?
Yeah, we work pretty closely with a lot of the different program areas or services. So like memberships, obviously, making sure that folks, a lot of times for us, it's people coming in on a guest pass. So you can buy a guest pass at the front desk to come in for like one time. Making sure that like waivers are set up correctly. Facilities, obviously, with like making sure the space gets cleaned and repaired and repainted, correct signage. Duke is really particular about signage. Got in trouble for using tape on the wall. Um, and then for the different like program areas, we'll host a lot of times at the climbing wall. So I've had some of the PE classes will come and use the climbing wall for like one of their class days. So like I think it was a women's weightlifting class or like a functional body weight fitness class. Like they'll come and use the wall just to like see how over the semester like they've become more attuned to like different muscles in their body and like how that helps them do like different activities. That's really sweet.
Yeah.
Uh, those are always really fun.
Nice. Okay. Only a couple more, but
Okay.
um, how do you incorporate sustainability practices within your operations?
Good question. We have shifted, this feels like it should have happened like mid 2000s, but we have shifted away from paper forms and we've gotten a lot more of them online.
Mhm.
So that's a process we're still working on. But when I got here, there was a lot of paper, a lot of paper being used. So we've moved like all of the equipment side of things onto an online form. Trying to think what else. We have for our sleeping bags, we'll send out a sleeping bag liner with them. That way we can wash just the liner. It's kind of like a bed sheet. Instead of having to like send these like huge bulky bags to the washing machine because they can only fit like one or two at a time in there. So that cuts down on that. Um, and then to answer it in like a different way, sustainability as far as like program sustainability, we try and pay attention to like my boss and I's schedule and our students' schedule so that we're not like front loading or like putting too much programming or trips like on a weekend when the students also have like
Yeah.
champion basketball games or like we're in reading period right now, so we're closed for the next 2 days because they're preparing for exams. So trying to like make sure our schedule lines up with like heavier or less heavy parts of the semester to keep the programming sustainable for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. And then this one's more about ethics. So how do you ensure that all the practices you're using align with ethical standards for the industry?
Yep. Um, I think going back to the North Carolina, South Carolina outdoor educators, that like monthly meeting is really helpful because we'll like shoot ideas back and forth. And then also a lot of our I would say like more like ethical or like justice oriented problems are like team meeting discussions. So it'll oftentimes be prompts where it's like everyone in the department meeting together, or especially outdoor adventures and aquatics usually lines up pretty closely
Mhm.
with like issues. So I'd say just like networking and chatting with other programs would be our number one way.
And how do you expect to see the industry evolving over the next few years? And what changes do you anticipate seeing like in your different roles that you'll take on?
Yeah, I think we're really rebounding from COVID, thank goodness. So I think that we'll see bigger trips come back. So whether that be like going West Coast or out to the desert in the Midwest, or even international trips starting to come back. So I think that is one. And then for my roles in the next few years, I think we will see, um, hmm, I think there's more people interested in like tourism and hospitality industries. So I do think we'll continue to see folks getting involved, especially with seasonal jobs. I feel like that's becoming more and more common for folks once they graduate to spend a year or two doing that, or even just doing it like during college summers.
Yeah. So this is the last question.
Okay.
What advice would you give to someone looking to pursue a career in tourism and event management?
Yeah, I would say figure out what you're passionate about and then just start trying part-time jobs.
Mhm.
So I know PRTM had me do shoot what did they call them? They were like short little internships. Um, I forget what they called them. They had a fun name for them. But so I got to work like 4 or 5 different little jobs throughout college to kind of see like what I really enjoyed versus what I didn't. So like going into college, I thought for sure I wanted to be a park ranger. But then I got to shadow a park ranger through that, and realized like, whoa, I don't think that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
Um, so just like kind of getting that exposure, is what I encourage people to do.
Yeah. So, well, that's all the questions I have. So thank you.
Yeah.
Stop the recording. I'll pause it.